Life. What's this thing we call life? Take a look at the world, and then I'll invite you to take a look at your own life. Take a look at the world. Poverty everywhere. I read in the New York Times yesterday that the bishops of the United States claim that there are 33 million people in the United States who are living below the poverty line drawn by the government itself. If you think that is poverty, you ought to come to other countries and see the squalor, the dirt, the misery. You call that life? Well, I've got news for you. I'll show you life even there. About 12 years ago, a little more, I was introduced to a rickshaw puller in Calcutta. You know what a rickshaw is? The guy who, it's awful. I mean, a human being, you don't have a horse pulling you, but you've got a human being pulling you. The lifespan of these poor men is from 10 to 12 years once they begin pulling the rickshaw. They don't last very long. They get tuberculosis. See? Now, Ramchandra was his name. Ramchandra had TB. At that time, there was a little group of people engaging in an illegal activity called exporting skeletons. The government eventually caught on to them. But you know what they did? They sort of bought your skeleton while you were alive. If you were very poor, you went to them and you sold your skeleton for the equivalent about $10. And so they'd say to you, many of these rickshaw pullers, they'd say, how long have you been working in this trade? And Ramchandra says, 10 years. And they think, he doesn't have much longer to live. All right, here's your money. Then the moment you die, they pounce on the body, they take it away. And then when the body is decomposed through some process they have, they get hold of the skeleton. Well, Ramchandra had sold his skeleton. That's how miserable he was. And so on and on. He had a wife, he had kids, and the squalor, the poverty, the misery, the uncertainty. You'd never think to find happiness there, right? One day I said to this guy, nothing seemed to faze him. He was all right. Nothing seemed to upset him. I said to him, aren't you upset? He said, about what? You know, your future, the future of the kids. He says, well, I'm doing the best I can, but the rest is in the hands of God. I said, hey, but what about your sickness? That causes suffering, doesn't it? He says, a bit. We got to take life as it comes. I never once saw him in a bad mood. Well, one day when I was talking to this guy, I suddenly realized I was in the presence of a mystic. I suddenly realized I was in the presence of life. It was right there. He was alive. I was dead. You know, a person, a man who reincarnated in himself, those lovely words of Jesus, look at the birds of the air. Look at the flowers of the field. They don't sow, they don't spin. They don't have a moment of anxiety for the future, not like you. It was right here. I know he must be dead by now. You know, I met him very briefly there in Calcutta and then went on to where I live now, further south in India. What happened to this guy? I don't know. But I know I'd met a mystic. Extraordinary person. He discovered life, rediscovered, discovered. You know, it's interesting. I frequently reflected. The human mind is such an extraordinary thing. It has invented the computer. It has split the atom. It sends ships into space. It has not solved the problem of human suffering, of anguish, loneliness, emptiness, despair. You're pretty young, most of you. But I honestly don't think you're strangers to loneliness, heartache, emptiness, depression, despair? How come we haven't found the answer to that? We've made all kinds of technological advances. Has that raised the quality of our living by 1 inch? Want to know my opinion? No, not 1 inch. Oh, we have more comfort, more speed, pleasures, entertainments, that's right, more erudition, greater technological advances. What I'm saying is, any improvement on that loneliness and emptiness and heartache, any improvement on that greed and hatred and conflict, less fighting, less cruelty? If you want my opinion, I think it's worse. And the tragedy is, as I discovered 10 or 12 years ago, the secret has been found. I was in St. Louis, Missouri, giving a workshop, kind of a weekend workshop. There was a priest there who came to see me. He said, you know, I accept every single word you've said over these 3 days, every single word of it. And you know why? Not because I've done what you encouraged us to do, to cut and rub and scrape and analyze. He says, no. He said, about 3 months ago, I assisted an AIDS victim on his deathbed. And the man told me the following. He said, Father, 6 months ago, the doctor told me I had 6 months to live. How right he is, because how right he was. The man was dying, see. He said, I had exactly 6 months to live. And I believed him. And you know something, Father? These have been the 6 happiest months of my whole misspent life. Happiest. In fact, I've never been happy till these 6 months. I discovered happiness. He said, as soon as the doctor told me that, I dropped tension, pressure, anxiety, hope, and fell not into despair but into happiness at last. And the priest said, you know, many is the time I've been reflecting on the words of that man. He said, when I heard you this weekend, I thought, the guy's come alive again. You're saying exactly what he said. Here's another guy who had it.